Hello readers of The Edit today. We have scary stories from the sea on the timeline. I will not detain you anymore. Put a like and subscribe to the channel of pleasant viewing. Story 1 from user Daniel Stripe Tiger. I so rarely get to tell the story of Oscar. It's one of my favorites, and all true. I was working as a dive instructor on a tiny island in the Gulf of Thailand. Long time ago, we had a lot of backpackers who stuck around to train as recreational dive masters. One guy who was part of a group of friends training with us was a Swede named Oscar. I liked him. Sweet kid, very nice, highly athletic, and fun to be around. Good to work with, very short and good looking with long blonde hair, a tiny little Viking friend. When dive masters finish the program, we usually have a party with lots of silly games, stupid rites of passage, including drinking a bucket of Thai whiskey and Red Bull through a snorkel, etc. Just a stupid reason for really excessive drinking. We had several of these per month in the middle of Oscar's party and feats of ceremonial consumption. He had to leave with a friend to catch an overnight ferry across the Gulf for a dive trip. No problem. He made the ferry, but his friend woke up a little before daybreak and couldn't find him anywhere on the boat. Anywhere Oscar had disappeared at some point during the 7-hour night trip. No one saw him fall, but apparently he had around the same time. Back home on our tiny island, Oscar's roommate was confused to find him dripping wet at the door, but with a rather lengthy explanation. Alcohol, Xanax, and weed sent Oscar above deck for a cigarette. In the middle of the night, he didn't remember falling, but he remembered seeing the boat leave him struggling, treading the cold, 46-foot November surge in the Gulf of Thailand, alone. Soon there was no light in the distance at all. None. Not even in the moonless, clouded sky. No light in any direction on the water. No indication of which way led to shore, possibly 100 kilometers away, and which way led to sea. No idea which way the current was taking him alone. Comprehending, then panicking. Swimming, struggling to think. Struggling to stay afloat, trying to think through the alcohol and drugs, through the cold and the fear, the constant rise and fall and beating of the water, the aching, heavy limbs and burning lungs. Aspirating salt water for hours, he didn't know how many enough time to understand thoroughly that he was going to die any minute. Maybe this one. No salvation. No hope of rescue time to say goodbyes and prayers. He would die cold, suffering alone, and he would never be found. Then exhausted and numb. There was another pain, the sudden disorienting pain of being thrown against a solid object. Though he could not see it, he had touched nothing solid in hours. His body had forgotten as it was dying. It was terrifying. It was a tiny fishing boat, possibly the only one within countless square miles of remote water. The handful of crew was asleep for the night. On deck, thank God, or they likely wouldn't have heard him calling for help. He rowed home in silence. Burmese boat boys don't tend to speak English. That's the story as he told it while he was gathering fresh clothes. There was only a few minutes to catch the morning ferry. He was going to catch up with his friend, who was by now on the mainland across the Gulf, and he was going diving. Story 2 from user Night Whaler. I've written a comment or two through here about suicides, death, depression. Lots of folks have written about the loneliness, the melancholy, the stars, and the tangible black void. It's all true. The thing that scared me the most, though, well, I may very well identify myself to about 350 people, or so, depending on who reads and remembers. If you know who I am, I ask that you remember our family and respect our mutual loss. If you must, you can drop a "Hey, I know who this is," and you can hit me up on Facebook, but please don't drop anything further. Identifying in the comments my division was called over the 1MC intercom to assemble in the hangar of our ship. Most of my sailors worked in the hangar frequently, and those who weren't there were likely topside and nearby. I was in our office one deck below, but all the way at the forward end of the ship, I figured I'd be about the last one to make it there and didn't rush. I had an ominous feeling an entire division, including its chain of command, didn't get assembled by just anyone. This was my boss or higher, and it was only ever for something surprisingly good or exquisitely bad. The preceding days had been almost completely normal, barring a storm the night before, and some chatter that some folks weren't standing watch appropriately. all perfectly, terrifyingly normal. I arrived at the hangar a few minutes after the call. It doesn't take very long to go anywhere. On a cruiser, being the size of a rural middle school, with 2 New England motels stacked on top of it. I entered through a side door and found the division formed up on the port side in 2 lines. A constant visual reminder of our undermanning. My valiant, exhausted, and devoted division, my C family. My children. I step quickly over to them asking if they're all right, if they know why we are here. Mutterings of, "I don't know, and this shit is cutting into my sleep, sir." My boatswain's mates were some of the first people to ever know anything on board, and none of them had an inkling. More trepidation. I reassured them that it'll be quick, whatever it is, and we can get back to finishing up maintenance and get everyone done. For the day, we wait. The sound of the waves was distant, though only 20 feet away. The smooth blue glass undulated against the steel hull. Cutting smoothly through the sea, the air was humid as always, and the division squirmed and shifted, waiting for whatever news we knew was coming. The CMC XO and captain entered the hangar from a level above the motels referenced before and arranged themselves in front of us. The captain, to his extreme credit, delivered his news with a stark and empathetic directness. One of our shipmates, my divisional leading petty officer, had died the night before. He was temporarily assigned to another ship on our deployment, and although upset at being away, had been eagerly training and helping the equivalent division on the other ship during his walk-around inspection before calling it a night. He slipped the storm, made the decks treacherous. Even the non-skid special cement-like putty used to coat the decks and make them rough to prevent this sort of thing didn't help. In the torrential rain, he had landed hard, his temple hitting the knife edge, a raised bit of sheet metal surrounding the decks to prevent debris or tools from being washed overboard. Easily, the medical emergency was apparently called immediately, scrambling emergency flight quarters to medevac him to the carrier where a proper hospital wing awaited my sailor. My friend, my brother died in that helicopter. The news was delivered with less flowery language than I've given here. And the silence rang in my ears when the captain finished, my heart broken too. And I realized that the 20-odd young men and women beside me needed something, anything to bridge the gap between the militaristic hardness and their repressed human despair. So rawly ignited, I turned wordlessly, motioning for a group hug for those who needed it, and a silent glance and affirming nod for those who preferred to grieve in place or retreat to somewhere they could suffer out of view. My children cried, they ached, they screamed. We held each other together in that moment, and in the days, weeks, months, and year that followed, the news spread throughout the ship, and everyone was keeping an eye out for each other. The village came together. We had a memorial. We had bracelets made. I wear mine every day. And it's been nearly 4 years. Time is unjust. I promised fear, though. And so far I've described anxiety and grief, which are what you'd expect a human response to this situation to be. What made me afraid while I held my division and tried my best to both be strong for them and show them it was okay to fall apart. I watched the Captain XO and CMC leave the hangar, leaving us to our mourning. The captain met my gaze with a somber look of understanding. I know my people and what they need. He trusts me. The XO slight bewilderment. How on earth could I be this close to my division? I'm not their parent. Surely I know that CMC veiled anger. There is no time for this weakness. It will only affect the division negatively in the future. In the hours and days that followed, I was spoken to between moments of solitary grief, checking up on my folks, going to meetings, standing watch, doing my admin work, and inso-actions. I needed to know that they couldn't have the division officer moping around and allowing people to not work. Because they're sad, to be fair. Those points are valid in war, which we weren't in, and in the military, in general, which we were. But these were hyperbolic. No. Work was shirked, no moping indulged, just honest discussions about how people were feeling. The fear for me came with the eerily quick severance of empathy for human emotion, in the wake of loss and the speed with which the acuteness of it faded, both in the division and in me. I don't mean that anyone stopped caring or feeling, but the mind has a way of protecting itself, especially under stress or duress. both of which deployment brings, and the involuntary compartmentalization, both internally and externally, of our pain was horrifying to me. I'm still in, and still doing the best I can for everyone around me. I like to think I'm still having a net positive effect on the world, taking care of my sailors, letting them know it's all right to not be all right. And that, it'll be there, I'm no longer assigned to that ship. In fact, none of us are. But if any of you recognized me here and you need me, just ask for everyone else. Thanks for reading. Always family. Story 3 from user SmartDress 1090. Worked on a schooner in California. Years ago, me and the bosun were shaking out the crew for morning chores, scrubbing the deck and polishing brass. A new deckhand was scheduled to join. She was from Maine, so we'd hoped she had some experience. Sitting at the end of the dock, however, was a girl in a lavender vinyl pantsuit, all-bean duck boots, and the cutest little suitcase. She had just graduated college with an art degree. After a 2-week sailing excursion in Camden, she'd decided to try her hand at sailing, calling around to various boats. Our office was the first to take her in. Lucky us, she was bright enough, but a maritime education starting from scratch on a wooden sailing ship. Let me tell you, we got our steps in slowly, but surely she learned the ropes. Off came the shoes, unless working aloft away, went the heavy garments that just soak up water in favor of a t-shirt and light khaki pants. Gloves gave way to calloused hands, and throw that godforsaken Swiss Army knife over the side one day. She was splicing rat lines and it hit me. I looked around for the bosun. His eyes twinkled and he tried not to smile. It was time we knocked everyone off early and ran some much-needed errands. After dinner, we gathered in the forecastle, where the crew bunked in the gloom of the musty compartment. The ceremony began. We passed around a bottle of rum and shared it with all but her. Each crew member read a selected passage or poem. The bosun's contribution was a personalized version of The Iceworm by Robert Service. He recited it from memory slowly and deliberately as he read the final lines. We presented the bottle of rum to her, mourning her former life. She let go a few tears and took a big slug from the bottle. Then the bosun handed her a new rigging knife, straight-bladed with a thick back, to accept hammer blows for that stubborn line or wire. We were a tight bunch. Passengers would comment how well we got along, how effortless we made it. Look, our last trip of the season was a week-long transit from Long Beach to Monterey, beating up the whole way. Some maintenance before the summer season started, then change out. With another crew anchored in Catalina, we made plans to travel together. What about our newest shipmate? She'd had a boyfriend back home, but she was pretty sure that was over. He wasn't a sailor, but how to break it to him? Leave that to me. I picked a postcard at the store in 2 Harbors, I wrote. She had found a new love, and that love is the sea. And once the sea has a hold of your soul, you can never get free not knowing the boyfriend's name. I simply stamped it and gave it to her. She read it, gave me a hug, then posted it before we sailed. The trip north wasn't particularly rough 15-foot swells from the northwest, typical 4-point conception. But we lost the bobstay and a backstay, so the captain decided to run back to Long Beach for repairs. It was an easy point of sail, but it put the waves on our port quarter. I had the 48-watch traditional for the chief mate. I came into the cockpit at 1550 to relieve the bosun. Both watches, almost a dozen people were scattered about the deck for turnover. A shadow loomed over my left shoulder, and a huge wave swept half the deck, rolling the ship to starboard and dragging crew and passengers with it. Quick hands got a hold of the passengers, halting their departure, but the curly locks of our mainer went over the side and starting drifting astern. The dreaded call of man overboard went up as life rings and life jackets were tossed over the side. I stayed with the ship in Long Beach while the rest of the crew flew to Maine for the service. The bosun returned and described the scene. The family had been understanding of what had happened. While they weren't sailors, life in coastal Maine gave them a healthy respect for the sea. But the bosun was still uneasy. "What is it?" I asked. I met the boyfriend. He said he was pretty shaken. Shortly after getting the news of the accident, he received a postcard. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and write comments. See you later.